everyone. I'm going to be doing my quick review of Thor Love and Thunder, which I saw 2 nights ago. So this is, next bajillion movies in MCU and Phase 4 and all that. So I guess before I get started on what I thought of this movie, I'll just briefly go over what I thought of the other Thor movies. The first one I liked fine. It's not anything spectacular, but I think it's a pretty solid origin story for Thor. I liked Loki. Obviously, you guys know I'm a huge fan of the character of Loki. I liked Loki as the villain. I thought that Kenneth Branagh's direction for the most part was pretty good. I kind of thought that the constant slanting of the camera to everything was sideways was a little weird. I know he said that he did that because he wanted the movie to look like a comic book, but I felt like it kind of went a little overboard at times. But yeah, no, I liked the first one for the most part. My main issues with it were pretty much the same as Thor: The Dark World, that I just didn't really care for the stuff on Earth. Jane, Darcy, I didn't think they were horrible, but I was just never that super invested in them as characters. I honestly was just so bored anytime that the movie went to Earth. I'm like, okay, when are we gonna get back to Asgard? Because that was when I was the most invested in the movies. Thor: The Dark World is obviously the weakest Thor movie. Obviously, a lot of people will probably agree with that. It's just the story's not great, the villain is super boring, which is a shame because it was Christopher Eccleston is actually a very good actor, so I feel like it was just kind of wasted in that role. And again, there was a lot of stuff with Jane and Darcy, and I just didn't really care about. And yeah, I think pretty much I will argue that Loki is the only part of that movie that is worth watching. I generally really think that that movie would just be completely worthless if it weren't for him, because he does bring a lot of humor and genuine investment into the movie. And then Ragnarok obviously was probably my favorite out of all the Thor movies. I know that a lot of people, particularly people who are big fans of Loki, didn't really like it very much because it's a huge tonal shift. They basically just add a lot more humor and kind of turn a lot of characters into punching bags and all that, and I 100% get that, and I totally understand why people, that's not really their thing. If you were really into the first 2 Thor movies and you aren't a fan of this huge, shift in tone that Taika Waititi brought, that's definitely understandable. For me, I wasn't super bothered by it. I thought that the humor pretty much worked for the most part for me in Ragnarok. I thought that a lot of the jokes hit. I liked the look of the movie was just fantastic. I love the design of Asgard and Sakaar, and the cinematography was all beautiful. And so it was pretty good. I would have liked for some more dramatic moments that weren't always undercut by these constant Marvel quips, these Marvel jokes. But it didn't really bother me that much for the most part. This movie, it definitely did. I guess overall, my general thoughts, I thought this was okay. Was kind of meh movie. I wouldn't say it's worse than The Dark World because Gore, played by Christian Bale, is a much better villain, is a much more interesting villain. And I do like that there's more color and just kind of more atmosphere to the movie, but yeah, it's still not great, and I feel this is definitely a showcase of how people are saying that the constant Marvel jokes are really kind of starting to get old and grating, and it really does show in this movie. There's just a lot of jokes that really just do not work, that I just wasn't really laughing at. A lot of the humor felt very juvenile and for 11-year-olds, and it I was just okay, this is just stupid. Yeah, I guess I'll just kind of start off by saying what I did like about the movie, without getting into spoilers, and I can briefly go into spoilers later on. So first off, obviously, like I said, Gore, played by Christian Bale, is a great villain. He's got a great backstory, great design, great look. I know some people were kind of complaining that the design of Gore wasn't super accurate to the comics, because in the comics he's got he doesn't really have a human face. He doesn't have he doesn't have a nose, and he has kind of this tentacle beard mustache thingy going on. That didn't really bother me. I feel like, especially Christian Bale is one of those actors where, like, you really want to see his face and his expressions, and I wouldn't really want to see all of that covered up by, like, CG. So I was fine with that. I was fine that we got to see more of his face. The look and design of the movie, for the most part, is pretty good. Like, the design of, like, the place that they go to, like, the Hall of the Gods, where all, like, the gods, like, Zeus and everyone are, that place looked really cool. I thought that the fact that they had the battle where, like, everything goes to black and white, I thought that was really, like, stylistic, and that looked really cool. There are a couple of effects that, looked a little cheap, and I feel like that's kind of, like, a continuing trend, unfortunately, in a lot of the MCU projects, where the CG is just not looking very great. But for the most part, I thought that overall it looked pretty good. Again, I like, the character Thor. Chris Hemsworth's obviously very charismatic, very funny, a lot of fun to watch. I feel like a lot of the issues with the characters did come down to, like, the writing, which is not always great. I feel like this is one of those movies where I feel like the short runtime kind of hurts it, because I feel like we aren't given enough time to really focus on a lot of characters. Like Jane's story, I wish we were given more time with her. I won't go into, like, basically, like, how, like, she becomes, like, Lady Thor and all that, but I feel like that was very rushed. I wish that we gotten more time with, like, Gore and, like, more interactions with him and Thor and Jane and everybody. There's just kind of, like, one scene more or less where they, like, talk, and that's pretty much it, and I wish we were given more time to focus on that. And a lot of it is, like, it just feels very rushed, and another thing too is that, like, and this is kind of a trend not just with this movie but a lot of other movies that Thor has been in, where he'll, like, in the previous movie he'll undergo some kind of, like, a transformation or, like, seriously, like, shift in his character arc, and then the following movie just completely undoes it and then, like, erases it. So, like, in, like, Ragnarok, he has this whole arc where, like, oh, I don't need my hammer anymore, I can just use my powers, like, just me, like, I'm enough. And then immediately in Infinity War, they're like, actually, no, I can't fight Thanos without my hammer, so I need to go build a new weapon, now I have Stormbreaker. It's like, okay. So that arc was kind of pointless. And then, again, in Endgame, where he, like, gains weight, and that's kind of a big shift. Here, they just immediately undo it. Nope, no, he's back in shape, everything's fine. And it's like, okay, so if you're gonna just undo that arc, then why would you even have it in the first place? Like, it just kind of feels pointless. Like, I don't even think he has, like, his fake eye in this. Like, his eyes look completely normal. Like, they don't address that at all, so I don't know what happened with that. It just kind of feels like all of, like, the things that, like, he, like, loses as a character, he just immediately gains back. So it feels like all that whole arc, like, wasn't earned and was kind of pointless. And kind of going off that, I also feel like just Thor's general, like, character arc and, like, all the things that, like, all the people that he's lost, everything, we aren't really given time to explore that. And that's not just in this movie, that's also in, like, Endgame, where, he's, at that point, he's lost everybody. He's lost his family, his mom, his dad, his brothers, his friends, everybody. And they don't really talk about how, like, that's affected him. They just kind of turn it into a joke, like, oh, he's depressed, so he's fat now. Like, okay. And then the same thing in this movie, like, they kind of turn it into a joke, like, oh, he's sad. They show, like, a clip of him, like, drinking beer or something and, like, crying with the Guardians, but they don't really talk about, like, what Loki meant to him, what his mom meant to him, what his dad meant to him. Like, it's all just kind of glossed aside and turned into a joke, and I wish we had those conversations. I wish, like, we were given time to see how this is, like, actually affecting him, and it's just not discussed at all. Like, they barely even mention Loki at all, aside from, like, there's this opening narration where, like, Korg is telling, like, Thor's, like, life story to this, like, group of, like, alien kids, and he's like, oh yeah, his mom died, his dad died, his brother died, like, 3 times, and then, like, later, obviously, if you guys saw in the trailer, like, there's this joke where Thor has this giant, like, tattoo of Loki's helmet on his back with R.I.P. Loki written on it, and, like, that's it. Loki's never, like, even, like, discussed again. And, you know, obviously, like, Loki was a huge part of his life. His parents were a huge part of his life. So I feel like it's really weird that we're just kind of, like, pretending that they didn't exist, and we're not really, like, going into how they actually affected Thor's life. And I don't know, it didn't sit right with me. I didn't really like that. And I swear I'm not just saying that because I'm a huge Loki fan, although, yeah, I will be honest, these movies just don't feel the same without Loki. You know, like, there's this whole saying of, like, you know, there's no Thor without Loki, no Loki without Thor, and I don't know, it just feels weird that it just doesn't feel right without him, to be honest. But yeah, so I guess kind of like general story, Jane gets the hammer, becomes, like, Lady Thor, and I feel like it might be spoilers going to, like, specifically, like, how that happens, so I won't go into that too much. But then, of course, Gore, the God Butcher, wants to kill all the gods, and then they have to team up to fight him. And, like, this part where they go to, like, they try to recruit, like, there's this whole, like, hall of gods where, like, all the gods from different, like, mythology are there, and they were trying to recruit them. It doesn't really work out. And yeah, I mean, like, these are definitely cool ideas, but I feel like we're just not given a whole lot of time to really explore them, and they're more focused on just having these cheap jokes and not really, you know, actual character stories. Biggest thing for me is that, like, I just do not give a shit about Thor and Jane's love story. I'm sorry, like, again, like, part of that goes through, I just never found Jane to be, like, super interesting as a character, but the thing that really irritates me about, like, their relationship is that, like, they just fall back on these really, like, annoying, tired rom-com cliches of, like, oh, will they get back together? Oh, they act like they hate each other, but, you know, of course we all know that they actually love each other, and blah, 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 and, like, that just doesn't do anything for me. If it does for you, great, but, like, I just find it really annoying and tiring, and it's just, it's not my thing. And when you have, like, the whole, like, movie story kind of centered around that, like, it's just not gonna work for me. Like, at least with the first Thor, yeah, Thor and Jane's love story was, like, a part of it, but we still had this whole other thing going on with, like, Loki and the Destroyer and everything, so that was still enough to keep me invested, and we just don't have that same level of, like, storyline investment in this one. As far as, like, other things, like, other jokes that didn't really work for me, the goats, I'm sorry, they're really annoying. I just did not find them funny at all, and they're in this movie a lot, too. Like, even if you found, like, the screaming goat meme from, like, what, like, 10 years ago now funny, like, it's gonna get old very fast. Like, they scream a lot, and, like, even if, like, it was funny at first for you, it wasn't for me. Like, I just always found it annoying, but, like, even if it was funny at first, like, I feel like it's gonna get to a point where, like, okay, this is just getting irritating now. And, yeah, again, like, it does kind of fall into that thing where, like, it feels like they're just, like, doing a lot of these cheap, like, memes and jokes for, like, these laughs, and, like, you don't need to do that. Like, I don't know if that's, like, Disney stepping in and saying you need to do that, because, like, Taika Waititi is a very funny writer. You know, I thought Thor Ragnarok was very funny. You know, Jojo Rabbit was really funny. A lot of these jokes really just didn't work for me. That's not to say that all of them were bad. I feel like Chris Hemsworth can take some lines that aren't super funny all the time and, like, deliver them in a way that is kind of funny, but yeah, for the most part, like, a lot of them I just thought were really annoying and didn't really work for me. Yeah, so that's pretty much just, like, my general overall thoughts. Like, if you, like, really, really, really liked Ragnarok, you might like this fine. Again, I don't think it's anywhere near on the same level, but, if, like, that style is, like, your thing, then you might enjoy it. If you hated Ragnarok, you will despise this movie. You will not like it at all. Like, there's nothing that, like, Ragnarok would have, like, offered, or there's nothing that this movie's, like, doing any differently, or certainly not doing any better than Ragnarok. So if that's not your thing, you're not gonna like this either. Yeah, I mean, I guess, like, you know, it does kind of just fall into this thing where, like, it feels like the MCU is just, again, kind of, like, starting to decline and go downhill, and I feel like a lot of, like, the new writers and new, like, directors coming in aren't really, like, I guess I would say that they're just not really understanding what made the original movies work, what made us like these characters. Like, you don't need to have all these annoying, like, memes and jokes every 5 seconds. You know, these characters are interesting as they are. Like, you know, we've been watching these characters for, like, over a decade now. You don't need to have all of these, like, throwaway lines and, just, like, cheap, like, one-liners just to keep us invested. Like, you don't need to do that. And it just feels like a lot of these writers aren't really getting that, and they're afraid that we're gonna lose interest if they don't have these dumb jokes every, like, 5 seconds. So, like, I remember I saw, like, this post where somebody said something like, the MCU Phase 4 is, like, playing, like, side quests after you've completed the main story of a video game, and, like, I literally could not think of a more perfect analogy. Like, I feel like there's just nothing to be invested in now after Endgame. Like, you know, like, before, like, the Infinity Saga felt very much like it was building up to something, and, like, even though I know that they are eventually gonna build up to, like, some, like, big, like, movie in the future, like, I just, like, at this point, like, I'm just not, like, invested enough to even care at this point anymore. Like, this just, it just doesn't feel earned, it doesn't feel, like, worth it anymore. And especially with just, like, the general, like, quality of, like, the movies and shows going downhill. I mean, like, aside from No Way Home, which I thought was really great, like, I just haven't really, like, even the movies that I liked, like, I liked them fine, like Shang-Chi and stuff, like, I liked them fine, but I didn't think they were, like, spectacular or anything. And yeah, like, a lot of them I feel like have just been, like, really declining in quality from, like, compared to, like, their predecessors. Like, again, like, with Doctor Strange and now this movie, Thor, Love and Thunder, like, it's just not the same anymore. So yeah, this is just kind of, like, my overall review. I didn't want this to sound super negative because, again, I don't think this movie was horrible by any means. Again, like, I still think they, like, the characters that I like were enough to keep it afloat, but it's just not, the writing just doesn't work a whole lot for me. So yeah, I guess overall as a grade, I'd give this, like, a C. Again, I think that, like, if you just watch the trailers, I feel like you'll get a general feel for what the movie is and the kind of, like, humor that you're going into. So if you weren't super into the trailers, you're probably not gonna, like, seeing the actual movie probably isn't gonna change your mind. But if you did, you thought the trailers were funny and you liked it, I guess I'd recommend it. So I guess now I can kind of go into a little more spoilers. So we find out that, like, Jane has cancer, which is a storyline that is from the comics, and she wants to go to New Asgard to see if any, like, Asgardian magic can heal her, and that's kind of how she gets the hammer. Like, the hammer kind of, like, calls to her, I guess. And then they have this whole thing where, like, yeah, the hammer is giving her strength, but it's also, like, weakening her, like, it's taking away her ability to fight the cancer. They don't really explain that very well, because, again, like, that whole thing is very, very rushed. So, like, she's, like, super powerful one second, and then, like, the next second she's, like, dying on, like, a hospital bed, and it feels very sudden and very rushed, and, like, you don't really get how we got from, like, point A to point B. So that's kind of another issue that I had. Darcy is back, but, like, very, very briefly. Again, I was never really a huge fan of the character of Darcy. I just didn't think she was very funny, but I guess if you did like her, then, like, you'll be glad to see her again, even just for a little bit. And she's not, like, awful in this. Like, I think she's fine for the most part. She's just kind of, like, there to, like, support Jane as she's, like, going through chemo. And yes, as far as, like, Gore's backstory, him, like, losing his daughter, and he had faith in the gods, but then it turns out the gods that he prayed to were really selfish and didn't care, so he kind of like turns against them. And I guess like the necro sword that he has is also like corrupting his mind. I think in the comics he had a son, not a daughter, but that's just kind of like a minor change. But yeah, again, for the most part, I really liked Gore's backstory. I thought he was a really good villain. And again, Christian Bale is like always fantastic in everything. Yeah, I guess like the whole Thor and Jane love story kind of goes more or less how to expect. They do end up getting back together, but I was kind of surprised that they do end up killing Jane off. She ends up dying from the cancer / the hammer that I guess is like taking away her power. That was legitimately a very sad, very heartfelt moment. I feel like it was handled pretty well. And I was kind of surprised that they actually went that direction, because I felt like that was kind of a ballsy move of them to kill that character off. I feel like that was handled pretty well. And I wasn't sure how I felt about the idea of like Thor like adopting Gore's kid and later on, because I don't know, that's just, it wasn't something that was in the comics, and like it felt kind of like out of nowhere. Like Thor has never had any kind of interaction with this kid before, and then like now all of a sudden he's like adopted her basically. So I would have liked to see a little more interaction with her like before that, but I mean I guess that's kind of a nitpick. Yeah, I guess what else? Russell Crowe as Zeus was pretty funny. Again, like I thought some of the jokes were kind of not great, but I feel like he, for the most part, like his delivery was pretty funny. And I like this idea that like a lot of the gods actually are very selfish and kind of douchey, and so it's like no wonder that Gore wants to kill all of them. And yeah, I kind of like seeing like the Hall of Gods and everything. That was pretty cool. Yeah, I'm just kind of thinking what else. So yeah, there's this other storyline where like Gore like kidnaps a lot of the kids in New Asgard, and like that's kind of what the whole catalyst that drives him to go like fight Gore. Like that whole storyline, I feel like I wasn't super invested in. Obviously, like I didn't even think of it until just this moment. So yeah, they have like this character that's like the son of Heimdall. We don't really see a whole lot of him. So it just kind of happens. There's like the end fight scene where like Thor like kind of like gives his power to all the kids, and they all go and fight all the monsters and everything, which is pretty cool. But yeah, overall, like I just feel like this movie just didn't leave as much of an impression on me as it should have. Like I was just never really invested in Jane as a character, and I don't feel like this movie really did anything different for me to change my mind. I wish we saw more of Valkyrie. Like, I feel like she's just kind of like there in this movie, and yeah, she fights and stuff, but I feel like I wish she was given more of an arc, because I really liked her. And yeah, I just feel like a lot of, again, like I feel like I've been saying this a lot, but like a lot of focus was taken away from what we should have been getting, which was, you know, focusing on the characters and their arcs, and instead just given to goat screams. So yeah, that's kind of all I got. Yeah, the theater that I went to go see this was kind of like dead, so like I was the only person aside from like a couple of guys that walked in at last minute, so I didn't really get a feel for like what a full like audience would have thought of it. So I'm curious if like you guys went to a theater that really seemed to enjoy it. I couldn't tell either way from the theater that I was in. But yeah, I guess overall I feel like I've kind of given you a description of like whether or not you think this movie would work for you. But yeah, like if you just want like just a mindless, fun movie to watch, this will work fine for you. If you're really looking for something more from like these characters and more from, you know, the story, I feel like this is kind of gonna let you down. So yeah, that's kind of a review, and not sure when I'll be able to do another one of these vlogs. I just started med school, so I'm very, very busy. But I will try to do reviews as much as I can, and hopefully I will see you guys soon. Bye!